All right, guys. This is a special episode. This is not the regular episode. The regular one's still coming. I'll be recording it on Sunday, as usual. This is a separate one, an emergency one over this holiday weekend, because something's happening in gaming right now. I just can't sit on it, and it's been driving me crazy. And game preservation's losing, so I got to talk about it. You know me. And not slowly, not someday, but right now, I want to talk about why this is happening and what we actually lose and what, if anything, we can do about it. So buckle up. This is going to be an Adam rant. I'm sorry, but I just got to talk about it. So why this is happening? Well, follow the money. Here's the thing no one says out loud. This is about money. It was always about money. Let me give you the history because it matters. For most of gaming, the box that you bought, the system, was never where the money was. Sometimes they sold the hardware at cost, sometimes at a loss, especially modern consoles. The real money was always the games. Say when Sega built the Genesis, it cost them around $100 to make, and they sell it for around $100. Once a retailer took a cut, and you pay for marketing and shipping, they barely make a dime on the box. But where do they make the money? Well, that's a good question, right? So they made the money two ways. First, their own party games. Games like Sonic, that's a first party game. So that game is making money for them. But then they also made a fee off of everyone else's games. So if Electronic Arts wanted to make a Genesis game, they paid Sega a fee, and Sega manufactured the cartridge. Sega got a cut of every single game made for the machine. That's the whole model. Sell the box cheap, tax the games. Now here's the part that connects to today. They do the exact same thing with digital. When you buy a game on the Xbox store, Microsoft takes a cut. On the PlayStation Store, Sony takes a cut. On the App Store for Apple, Apple takes a cut. On the Play Store for Google, Google takes a cut. Around 30%. So on any digital store, you have no choice. You're buying it from them, right? I know there's some things been going around about Apple and the EU and Google, so there have to be some alternatives, but we don't have that yet in the video game systems. So you're buying a Switch game off the Nintendo store. You're buying PlayStation games off the PlayStation store and Xbox games off the Xbox store. So that's the exact place that you buy it, right? You don't buy it from anywhere else. So when you go all digital, some things change there, right? One company is really getting the gain, and that's Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo. They're not splitting money with a retailer anymore. They're not paying for manufacturing anymore. And here's the big thing, because when physical games go on sale, a disc drops to say $20 or $15. Three different people were making money off that physical copy, even at that lower price. The store was getting a cut, the publisher was getting a cut, and the platform holder, was getting a cut. And so the competition between different stores was what dragged down the price down for us, but you kill physical and you kill a lot of those sales. You don't have to be a genius to see where digital only prices go. That's not in the market anymore, right? If there's no competition, then digital only prices don't even have to compete with the physical copies that sometimes went on sale. You might get those quarterly sales, the big summer sale or the big Christmas sale, but we're not going to see anything major. So that's a problem, right? So when Sony tells you they're ending discs for shifting trends, I want you to hear the real sentence. They make more money per machine without physical. That's the whole announcement. That's it. That's translated for you in Adam English. They make more off a digital copy than they make off a physical copy. They operate huge physical plants, and they don't have to operate those anymore once they do that. They're converting them over to different types of things right now. So what do we actually lose? And it's not just the collectors that lose it, right? I know you're going to be like, Adam, you're a collector, and I am a collector. And so, of course, I'm upset. And yes, I'm a preservationist. I love physical copies of media. If you look around my office, and I'll give you an office tour at some point for those that subscribe on YouTube, but if you look at what I have tons of media. Physical games. You can see some of them behind me, some of my stuff that's set up here. But I have records and books and games, because I like to have something I can hold it, right? Like no matter what's going on in the world, that game's still mine. And I know some ways a lot of these newer games on like the Series X and even the PS5, they're not really even mine, still in a physical copy. It's a kind of like a token key to access that game. But it's still an actual token key that can't be taken back from me, really. But I said all that because the part I need you to hear, it doesn't just hurt me, the collector. It doesn't just hurt all those of us that like physical media. It hurts everybody. And here's how. You lose resale completely. There are no more yard sale fines, no more flea market fines. The retro groups you follow, the ones posting, look at what I grabbed for $5 at a flea market, that stops because nobody's selling the empty case with a download code that's already been redeemed. Nobody screenshots up a used redemption code and posts it online and is like, oh, look what I bought. If they do, they're weird. Once a digital game is tied to your account, it's done. It dies with you. You can't leave it to your kids. You know, you see that. It's kind of off track, but you see that a lot online. People say, hey, my dad had this great Steam collection, right? And, you know, we can't access it. We don't have his password. And you contact Steam, it seems like, nope, we can't help you. That was his. It's not yours. Digital's this weird thing where what you own is just a license to content that you've purchased. And when you die, that content purchase is gone. You no longer hold the lease. So it's not a physical item that you can transfer to people or bequeath to people or pass down, you know, give your kids, give your grandkids, whatever. And so digital, it's like that first medium in our history where you can't hand it to another human being. You know, I can't say, you know, here's a copy of, you know, Animal Crossing here. And I can't say, you know, if I had a digital copy, it would just be like, here's an empty case, you know, you have the case, right? You can't pass down emptiness. You can't pass down digitalness. You just can't give it to somebody else. Like I could give a full copy of Animal Crossing with the cartridge to my wife, which that's her copy actually, because, you know, I purchased it and I own it and that cartridge works. Even when we went through Hurricane Helene here, we were able to charge her Switch in my car and she was able to play Animal Crossing. Didn't have to have internet. Didn't have to have power because it had its own battery. But if it was a digital version and, you know, Nintendo implemented some of the check-ins that Sony's recently done for digital versions and Microsoft has talked about doing for digital versions, wouldn't even be able to play it, right? Even if you had power, if you didn't have internet. So that's off track, but regardless. When we go all digital, and trust me, I have a Steam collection of 1,000 games or so probably. And, you know, that's how we PC game these days, because if you want to play anything new on PC, they don't make copies anymore, physical copies. The PC gamers of us, we've already been through this. But what's going to happen next is you're going to start losing stores because of this, right? You're going to lose GameStop, love them or hate them. Their time's on the clock because I know people go in there to buy used games, but the vast majority of people go into GameStop to buy new games. And GameStop makes money by trading in games and selling them back to you at stupid prices. So I'm more than worried about just GameStop, though. I'm worried about the local stores, the independent retro stores. I've got some friends that run a great one in town here and met with them a number of times. And I've got another one that lives in the next town over that I know, and some really great guys. And, you know, I just went by there this past weekend and, you know, right now people buy new games there as well as old games and retro games, but they'll pre-order their new games there because they want to give the money to, you know, these local guys. They don't want to give it to the Walmarts, the Best Buys, or the GameStop. And that's understandable. I mean, I love to support these guys too. If I need a new physical copy of a PS5 game or Xbox Series X game, you know, I'm going to give it to them too. I would rather them make $5, you know, I know they don't make a ton off of those games, then, you know, Best Buy to break even on the game, honestly, because I'd like to support local. What happens when we take away this option? You know, you take away new physical games and you take away a current generation crowd from these stores. And these stores that serve, you know, 2 generations are down to one. They're supporting the retro gamers with their used copies, but they also support newer gamers with the new copies. So 5, 10, 20 years out, a lot of these places, they're going to go out of business. They're not going to have the people coming in there anymore because there's not going to be any new games. They're going to lose a whole crowd of people. And so what happens when they lose this crowd of people? Well, if they don't diversify and the repairs or board games, they're gone. I mean, that's, I know my local store, they do a lot of repairs now. And when I first went there, they started trying to do repairs and then they stopped. And now they do a ton of repairs and they always are advertising about it because why? This industry as a whole for those guys is a tough industry and they need ways to make money. And you start taking away more and more ways for them to make money and they're not going to make it. So we start taking away physical games and we start running low on the used physical games. And where do we end up? A lot of closed places. May not happen. I believe it will, though. I've seen it happen to a lot of game stores I used to visit years ago. So, but it's not just, local places. It's the boutique stores. It's limited run. I am 8-bit. All these stores like that as well. They have to, they put they spend a lot of time and effort bringing games back, retro games back, physical copies. I've got a copy right here. Let me show you here. This is a copy of Grim Fandango, and this is a PC copy redone by Limited Run Gaming. Now, the key thing about this, they don't do a ton of PC games, and even fewer PC games do they actually do physical copies of. And this one's actually got a physical CD in there that you can run it on your computer. And so if you're like me, you love PC games, you buy them when the physical copies are available like that. But the vast majority of PC releases that are redone out there don't have a physical copy. It's just a download code and they don't sell well. So if we move to a future where even the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, Xbox One, and Nintendo Switch 1 and 2 copies of games that are on like IM 8-bit and LRG and things like that are just games that have a code, they're not going to sell well. I mean, and it's not going to be worth people's money to do that. So you have to kind of ask yourself, what happens to those places? Because, well, and I hope, and I know they've put out some videos and some news already that they plan to keep making games, but it's going to end right with the PS5. I mean, that's where we're at. I mean, that they're in the Xbox Series X, that's where they're going to stop making games. I mean, because they're not going to be able to make them for the PS6 because they don't have a, drive. And we know Project Helix for the Xbox is not going to have a drive either. So let me tell you about one other thing. And that no one's mentioned this, but it's kind of important to me because like I told you, I love physical media. And it's going to be something people don't realize it's going to happen. But movies, the vast majority of people who want to watch a Blu-ray or a 4K disc, watch it on a game console. If you go back to the PlayStation 2 era, it made DVDs popular, right? People bought them just for DVDs. People bought the PlayStation 3 just for Blu-ray. And now the 4 and then the 5 are the consoles people use for mainly watching 4K Blu-rays, or the Xbox Series X, or the Xbox One X. There's over 80 million PlayStation 5s out there right now. So that's a lot of systems under their TVs that they can watch a movie on. People aren't hooking up a second Blu-ray player plus a console. It just doesn't happen. And so this is going to be one of those things that kills physical movies too. And it's going to make it more niche because you kick the legs out from under the physical movies and you're going to say, Sony's going to be like, well, we're not going to make our Blu-ray players anymore because, right, we're not making discs for the PlayStation, or we're not making, movies anymore. So why should we even, make a Blu-ray player a standalone? And they make some great ones, but I imagine they're going to stop that as well. And we've already seen, discs start to collapse in the market, like they're becoming more niche and they're going to go away just because things like this are going to help kill the whole market. I'm not saying this is killing the market. Don't take me wrong, but they're leading that way. These are all stepping stones. So one decision could end up with two whole physical media markets gone. Now, let me lay out exactly where we stand, because I move real fast and this has moved real fast. And Sony this week, they announced that they're going to end physical disc production for all new PlayStation games in January 2028. The first of the big three to say this out loud. The same day, in a companion piece, Sony posted that they're closing the PlayStation Store for the PlayStation 3 and the Vita in certain select markets. Now, that starts region by region, but by this August it starts, but by summer of next year, 2027, they're going to be shut down. So if you are a PlayStation 3 guy, realize if you like physical copies and you haven't got those already and there were some digital only games you want, you better grab those too, because the door behind you is locking at the same time the door in front of you is disappearing. So we're not having any more physical copies for the newer consoles, and we're not going to have any more digital copies for the older console. So just be prepared. That's what's happening. Meanwhile, Microsoft has reportedly been building some kind of system to handle the removing of discs. And I think Microsoft's been building this since the first Xbox One was announced, because they kind of hinted at it in the announcement of that system before they got all the backlash about the DRM and the, lack of physical discs. And, Sony, of all people, made fun of them, But The Verge has been reporting, and Microsoft's not confirmed it yet, but, Microsoft's not confirming anything right now. So the reports say the next Xbox, codenamed Project Helix, will not have a disk drive, which is no surprise. It's mostly a PC system, it looks like. And as part of that system, though, they're testing a feature called disk to digital. You convert your physical Xbox One and Series X games to a digital copy tied to your account. Not the original Xbox games, not the 360, just the recent stuff, which has to ask you a whole lot about backwards compatibility of the newest machine, for one. But anyway, I'll give them this. They answered some questions I had and I was about to yell at before this information came out. The disk reportedly keeps working even after you convert it. So if you give the disk away to somebody else, they take the digital rights away from you as soon as you insert the disk into another Xbox and load those digital rights. So it's kind of thought out, and it's obviously, something that's engraved or stored on the disc, some type of ID system, because we know Blu-ray does have a unique identifier that can be added per disc. So every disc has its own individual serial number. But think about it. It doesn't include the 360 and the original Xbox. And Microsoft even told their testers that whether a disc from the Xbox Series X works or the Xbox One works will depend on when and where it was manufactured and how. So some discs, they just won't have those features. So like I said, the disc is going to carry the right features in there. We'll see how that works out. I don't know. I mean, if it can work out, and the fact that you could still maybe trade in your games and still get value for them or sell them to people or give them to people. But one thing that I really question about that is, like, in this world full of all of these licensing things that we deal with, right? Because they say old games can't be played anymore because you don't have the license and you've lost the music rights and all this stuff like that. How does this work with them making digital copies of some of these games? And can you transfer a physical game to a digital game that way? I mean, it feels like Microsoft's going to have to get a lot of people on board, kind of like they had to do with backwards compatibility. And it'll be interesting to see who all they can get on board. Will this just be like an EA thing and a Microsoft thing? Because those are like the main ones that, really publish a lot of games for Microsoft, maybe some Ubisoft as well, but we'll see. Some of the other games may not be able to work as well. So I'm interested to see how that works. But the thing I worry about is you do that, and how long is Microsoft still going to be around? Because, like, if you read my latest articles, it's kind of getting iffy out there. I mean, I know Microsoft always fires around anywhere from 5 to 20% of their staff every year, it feels like. But the amount that's going into the gaming division this time and the studios, that's interesting. Anyway, so talk about Microsoft, what they're doing, but what about the PlayStation 6? Well, if you look at the timing of their announcement and saying in 2028 no more games are made, that tells us 99.9% chance that PlayStation 6 ships without a disk drive. And so I just don't see them coming out with the PlayStation 6 with a drive, unless it's some kind of add-on, because they're not making any new PlayStation 6 games for it. The only reason they would use it is for some backwards compatibility with PS4, PS5 games. So I'm not saying this is like some kind of slippery slope of what's, could happen. I'm saying this is a set of announcements. They've put dates on this stuff. This is happening. So what do we do? The biggest problem here, honestly, is the preservation problem. It's the format question, right? Because if we wanted to say physical, the format problem is a brutal math issue. Games are 200 plus gigs now and climbing. I mean, Grand Theft Auto 6, they're saying 250, 300 maybe. You can't put that on a cartridge like a Switch. Memory would be too expensive to go with some kind of cartridge system like SD cards. You're talking $15, $20, $30 per game just in cartridge cost. The way Blu-rays and DVDs worked is they were cheap. And so we don't have a new optical format right now that's been pushed to super high density and that's cheap enough to press and cheap enough to get the players for and everything like that. We need someone to step in there and like yesterday, but nobody is. So what do? I don't know. And that scares me. The real point of all this is you don't own any of it, right? Strip all that down to hear what's left. In a digital world, you do not own anything. You're leasing it. It's a rental. Right up to the moment that, the server stops working, it's yours. But once that server's gone, internet's out, whatever, it's not yours anymore. Your lease is up. The good thing about a disk is it plays with no login, no server, no permission. 30 years later on a console and a power outage at your buddy's house hooked up to a generator, it's going to play a game. I will recognize that there are times that it won't because, some of these games now for the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, the games require day one patches to even do anything. It's just almost like the disc is a license, and that sucks. But for the games that do work, and there's quite a few of them. I mean, I've got a ton sitting over here. I like to buy the ones you can go online and look and see which ones carry the whole game. And you can play those, right? You don't have to have any internet, anything. You just throw it in and start. But a download code, it doesn't do any of that. And, there was a quote this weekend by Frank Cifaldi, the man who founded the Video Game History Foundation. These are the professionals, the guys, the actual archivists of this hobby. And, he said it flat out this weekend, and PC Gamer picked it up and did a story on it. But his words was, piracy is the only form of media preservation that exists in games right now because the companies refuse to offer a meaningful alternative. So think about that. The man who runs the archive is telling you the only way left to save a game is the thing they call theft. Of course, I sometimes ask myself is it really theft if you're not allowed to own anything anymore? Is it piracy if you don't let me have what I paid for? For me, that abstract's not new. This whole website that I have, that has went on since 1998 and then had to break and, brought it back. The archives only exist because of, a box of physical media survived at my mom's house. Zip disks, physical floppy disks, CDs, things that I had stuff backed up on, randomly from the late 90s and early 2000s. If I was relying on my servers being up or servers that I paid for to be up, which I lost a number of those and things went down, all of the archive would be gone, and if you're new to all this and, you've been digital all the time, if you don't have a physical copy of something, when those servers shut down, what do you have? So, I mean, like, you don't have floppy disks and things like this, with stuff backed up on them, from way back when. You don't have anything. It's not over. This fight is just going on, right? I mean, we've got to keep fighting. We've got to keep talking about this. Here's the honesty. Physical game spending went up last year for the first time since 2009. Now, the major thing about that is most of that came because of Nintendo and the Switch 2. And the people who track it say, it may not last, but it proves a simple thing. People bought more physical games the moment somebody actually sold them physical games. The demand these companies are walking away from is real. Nintendo, by every account, is not falling them off this cliff. Cartridges and family audiences keep physical worth making, right? In a world where things just disappear offline and move platforms and stuff all the time, people kind of want to hold on to something. And a problem is, a lot of times these physical copies, like I mentioned earlier, they're just nothing but a full download when you put it in. So it's not really like a physical copy, and people don't want that. We want a copy we can just put in and play, and we don't have that. And that's kind of the issue, right? You can't keep cutting physical copies out and making them more useless to buy and then be like, oh, physical doesn't work, because that's what Sony and Microsoft do most of the time. Because the boutiques, like I showed the one from Limited Run Gaming, they're constantly sold out, right? They're still pressing games, but they sell out as soon as they put out something new. People want that, so there is demand for it. And the homebrew crews, right? There's still guys out there making games on real cartridges. I mean, they're putting out Sega Genesis games still. It is crazy. And, there's things like Evercade, which is a handheld device that's like an emulation device, but it actually has cartridges with the games on it, and people buy it. People love it. It sells out constantly. So here's what you can do. Buy physical while physical is still a thing you can buy. Every disc and cartridge you own is a copy that answers to nobody. Support your local game store. Go pre-order your games there or buy your games from them. Support the boutiques like Limited Run Games and the homebrew folks that make, the physical copy of the games. If you want a Sega Genesis game and something new's coming out, if you love the Sega Genesis like I do, buy some of the games. I mean, we got Wallop Wallaby coming out soon on cartridge. That's great. So here's where I land. I've got a flood of editorials right now that just popped up on the website in the last day or two. The first one on the site is called The Subsidy Part 2. We talked about the subsidy in the first episode of the podcast. It's my sequel to that, and it's about the cuts and who actually pays for them, the developers, the human beings, the studios that were on stage at the showcase and the chopping block at the same time. So go read it. It's really good. Well, at least, I think so, and my wife said it was. So in the next few days, probably actually by the time you hear this podcast, there's another one dropping about Jim Ryan and the worldview that's kind of led up to this PlayStation disc fiasco. So check that on the website. And, that's this podcast, And one last thing let me mention. I'm going to keep it to gaming because I don't do politics or anything like that. But you have to remember, when you don't own anything, when it's all on just some account and you're trusting the account to stay yours, it's a lot of trust to hand to a company or anyone standing behind it. A disc or a cartridge or something on your shelf, it never needs someone's permission. It never asks you who you vote for. It never asks you if you can, is this too wrong for you to have or wrong for you to view or wrong for you to play? So my thing is, like, owning the thing is the only version of this where the answer to can I still play my game is always just yes. Because I've seen this movie before, right? I watched Sega do it. Sega screwed up and disappeared. I watched 3DO come out and I put my support behind them and they fell apart and they're gone. Same with Atari. We're deep in the find out era. A whole lot of companies that have spent years screwing around. And through every bit of it, physical media was the only thing that you actually owned that you paid for. And so I'm not going to pretend that I'm neutral about this and that this site is neutral when it comes to this. I want physical media to last, and I'm not going to watch physical media die quietly because I'm Adam Richardson and this is playing out of control. So go buy something and enjoy it.